I want to kind of shift gears just a little bit and talk about collaboration. Dylan, I know that had a lot of articles where you collaborated with other people. Grace, if you're in production, all you do is collaborate all day. Um, what was it like to kind of see your guys' roles expand as the internships went on and be like, oh wow, these people older than me are trusting me. How did you first build that and how did that feel outside of good?
Yeah, I mean, I remember, so, I said my first article was a co-byline, that I did with a full-time reporter. And so definitely was a cool experience. And then when I got to do my first standalone article, just me writing it, I remember, kind of at first, and again, kind of ties into the imposter syndrome, thinking, okay, how do I write this? Or kind of being doubtful of, okay, well, this is the way I normally write, but is this going to be, good enough for NBC? But honestly, I just remember, sending my draft to my editor and then, getting a message on Slack back saying, okay, put edits in bold, but, everything looks good. And I look at, the changes that were made. And I think I literally tried to have like two different tabs open, where I'm comparing my original and I'm comparing what's actually going to be published and thinking, wow, like everything is pretty similar. Or if there was something that was added, I'm thinking, wow, like that was a good addition. And again, that's where having, the editor, having the person with a lot of experience, they're making you better. And so definitely was something that I was grateful for and that I think, you definitely see that be rewarded with, better assignments and getting to do more stories.
Yeah. The number one piece of positive feedback that I got was that I used my voice, which is the most terrifying thing to do is to go into a pitch meeting with an anchor you've admired for years and try and say something about the show and like give your opinion on what should make the show. Um, but I went in and I just did that from the get-go. I don't know what got into me, but I did. And it really paid off because, got to work on these stories and I told them I really want to practice my writing scripts and they, slowly kind of folded me in to help me to let me do that. And it's yeah, big teams working on each story. And then it really peaked for me when the flooding hit Central Texas in on the 4th of July. I'm from Central Texas. My hometown was hit pretty hard. I know a family who lost everything. I was really passionate about the way that that whole event was covered, and I told them that. I cried in front of my team, and I hadn't even met some of them in person before. And I was just like very vulnerable about the way that I cared about these people in this story. And I am so grateful to them because they let me the intern take the lead on one of the stories we did about FEMA and how FEMA aid gets in the hands of people, specifically how long it will take and the process for people in Central Texas, because that was the next step that they were at that point. And so, yeah, I got to write it. I got to set up the interviews. I got to pick out the video. I got to work directly with Aaron Gilchrist, who's a great correspondent. And it's definitely mind-blowing, like being like, wow, I, you know, my team did so much of it. They edited all of it. They put the shiny bow on top. But to have people at NBC say like, yeah, we trust you and we know you care about this and we want you to take the reins on that, it showed me how much they care as journalists about putting the right person in charge of stories and so that they can be as accurate and as fair and but also as compelling as possible. And so anytime anyone on the team was close to a story, not necessarily like knew the source or anything, but like, had a heart for a story, they got to cover it because they did the best job at making sure, like we were talking about earlier, the emotion was there, the human aspect was there, which I think is the most important aspect in news, in my humble opinion.
And I would add too that what makes great journalists are the ones that have the best people skills and understanding that even if you're a professional journalist, if something happened, a catastrophe happened in Central Texas, and we have an intern who resides in Central Texas, you might be the most qualified person to talk about this. So I think it's very powerful to hear that even at the top, people are able to understand who has the best access to tell the best
Yeah.
because you
Yeah, it
have a
was
skill that other people that I couldn't access, that other people couldn't access.
Right. I think it was a really great display of leadership on their part that I learned a lot from because they were all so empathetic to me and but yeah, also very like just prioritizing the viewers, which was super cool to witness and learn from.
Dylan, were you ever in like how often were you in Congress?
So not too much. We did a tour as a group of interns, but I did get to, like with the special election story, interviewed who will soon be the congressman, but didn't really get to go up on the Hill that much.
How in those moments around top politicians or writing about top political stories, um, what did you kind of learn about the relations that you need to make to have great, I don't want to say great media, but to have very informative media in those spots?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think, really it was just a great experience to, really understand to understand the relationship between, the media and politicians because, you're interviewing or I'm interviewing some of these candidates, running for office. And so it's not just them on the Zoom call. Like it's not, just me and the candidate. It's, me, the candidate, and then whoever their communications person is. And I didn't have an experience where, like a comms person didn't like a question that I asked. But, it's just an interesting dynamic to see. And when you kind of see the behind the scenes of how the media is made, and how, a story's made or how a package is made, it's definitely helps you become a more informed, just news reader in general when you can kind of understand the choices a journalist made in crafting it. So I think with the politicians too, I mean, it was just also interesting just to, ask some more personal questions and, really try to, get to the heart at, when I'm covering a campaign for Congress, okay, like why are you running? And that can be, a more generic broad question at the start, but then, it goes so many different ways. They talk about their upbringing or they talk about, maybe their kids, they talk about, their job might be important to them. Like I interviewed a former prosecutor, a federal prosecutor who resigned because of the way the DOJ handled the Eric Adams case. For context, they essentially dropped the charges against him and tried to get, these federal prosecutors to back the decision. Not all of them agreed with it. And so, this one resigned and ended up running for Congress. So it's definitely just super interesting to, be able to talk to these people on a face-to-face, virtually, basis, which is definitely an experience I'm super grateful for.
How did you guys both take advantage of the relationships that you were able to make in the NBC News building? Like, I feel like that's like got to be one of the like the golden parts, not just people that are professionals, but also your peers, your other interns. How do you guys take advantage of that? Because I feel like, I don't know, that seems like the most awesome part.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, we're super grateful to have, like a big intern class. And so we had, it was like 9 or 10, Grace, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and so just to have like that group of people, like we would do karaoke, we had to get together before like I think the day or two before, our internships ended. And so, those are really great connections to make simply just because, everyone's amazing and it's so amazing to be around people who are also just so driven about what they do and who are really mission and goal oriented. But also, we're going to probably end up in the media. We could be working with each other 5 years down, 10 years down. And so the connections that you make early on definitely, I think, are ones that will stick. And so it's definitely helpful to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, the obvious connections you want to make are the ones with like Hallie or Andrea Mitchell or like these people that are just so high up and you're like, yes, please watch my reel, please edit my article, like please tell me everything I could do to be like you. Which, with that, that's just like making friends and becoming friends with them. But yeah, I will say like the people I really enjoyed getting to know, of course, I enjoyed getting to know everyone, but were like I really enjoyed my time with the tech crew. I got to really know the floor director for Hallie's show really well. He was just someone that when I talked to him, like he was asking me about my goals and things, and I could tell that he just really believed in me, which is so nice to meet people who you're like, yeah, like this person actually thinks that I can do what I want to do. And so, Bert, he's the best. And he like stayed late one day to let me record for my reel. And I know like he would totally advocate for me, even if it's not he's not necessarily an anchor I aspire to be. Those kinds of connections and like also just learning what so many people do. Like we have people who are designated to like book the interviews at NBC, which is like sometimes the hardest part of the job, and they're like very stressed all the time. And so when they got to like talk to me about like building connections and like getting to know people so that they'll come back, like those are great skills to learn and great people to know. So I think really like it's yeah, me I definitely think you should meet your heroes. But also like get to know people who have jobs that you never knew if you wanted to have or that you might never want to have.
Yeah, I think a very important part of all internships is not just learning what you want to do, but it's about what you don't want to do.
Mm.
What comes to mind when you think about what you don't want to do after this summer?
I will say I do not want to be a producer, and I was a production intern. Um, I which I had a feeling going into it. I probably wouldn't like it's a lot of desk work and it's what makes the show, you know what I mean? The producers have such an important job. They time everything. They make sure it's visually entertaining. It's so much. That's way more stressful to me than being on air, believe it or not. And so I learned that that's not my favorite thing, but it is so good to be able to have the skills to do things that you don't like necessarily because in a breaking news situation, you never know what hat you're going to have to wear.
Yeah, I mean, this wasn't something that I thought I would want to do, but just I have so much respect for, everyone who works on the technical side, of the shows, like, the floor directors, the camera operators. I honestly think probably the camera operator is one of the most stressful jobs you could have just because, you have to know, what kind of shot they want. And especially, again, like in a breaking news environment and things are changing, like, I think that's just a whole nother level of having to think on your feet that I'm like, I could never do that, but so much respect to those who do it because, that is, I think, a very hard skill to learn. And so you definitely have to be like cream of the crop, good at it.
Yeah, I feel having like a very wide vision when you're at an internship, whether you're doing exactly what you want to do or you're not, as long as you're observing what the people around you are doing that isn't exactly what you're doing and might be tangential to it. I feel like you can learn not just a lot about your industry, but a lot about yourself too.